Well, the dove runs out and I'm the rice. Biddy-da-da-da-da-da. Biddy. Oh, isn't it beautiful? Doesn't it sound wonderful? Good morning. Doug Rice. Relax. It's something I do. 7 a.m. Good morning to you. How are you this morning? Did we have a day yesterday? Yes, we did. We did a 7 a.m. show, and then we did a 6 p.m. live, a drive to keep the Doug Rice Show alive. It was awesome, I got to say. And that live is posted on YouTube. Yes, it is this early morning. You'll also find a pair of YouTube videos this evening at 6. Decided to put those in the mix. How are you this morning, folks? Huh? How are you? Listen, anyone who tunes in every morning at 7 a.m. is a Negro in the know. Any that watch the Doug Rice Show, are you watching the news? It looks like they moved. It looks like they may have moved into the Gaza, protected by tanks. No troops in. The troops are inside tanks. So I guess that's progress if you're talking about moving into an area that you've spent the last 2 weeks bombing into the Stone Age. So, as that fiasco grips the world stage, and it does, it's captivated the entire earth. I mean, even Donald Trump has to do something to get in the news now, right? I mean, this guy is off, he is off center, okay? And no longer the focal point. It seems the attentions have wandered. And now everyone's focused on the Middle East. But what I found interesting, to say the least, is that these same nations, these same exact countries that put this fiasco together, the state of Israel, are now plowing their ships toward the Mediterranean at light speed to assist the Israeli nation in all the things that they need. But you would think, after giving these folks $60 billion a year plus in support, they might have what they need to fill the report, but they don't. And when it talks about going in, they won't. Now, today, we're going to have a lot to say about that situation. We're going to look at this, and we're going to examine the Israeli nation. Is that who they are? The state of Israel. There is a publication by an author, Alison Weir. And he's got an interesting bit of information that I'd like to share. But I've already shared that, so let me share something else. Whoops. I recommend all of you begin the task of delving into books that they certainly wish we would never take a look into. This is one of those books. This is it. Against Our Better Judgement. The hidden history of how the United States was used to create the state of Israel. And I think that would have been a better tell. I think I would have liked that heading a little bit more. The hidden history of how the United States was used to create the state of Israel, by Alison Weir. Creating Israel on land already inhabited by Palestinians would imperil not only American, but all Western interests in the Near East. And that was Dean Acheson, a U.S. statesman in 1947, the year before the state of Israel became a reality. And so the reason this is so important is because we sit on the precipice of a global conflict involving the very individuals that now and then have questioned their being put there. There are now questions against our better judgment. There are questions back then, and there are still questions today. The tide is turning against what's happening over in what they call the Middle East. You know, there was a full-bore support of Israel until they kind of really went overboard with their kill. I mean, how many will equal the number of Israelis murdered on the 7th? Because at this point, it looks to me like an offset number, an offset and unequal response, and they are continuing to throw in their bombs. And, you know, the folks that are being killed, those individuals in no way had any part with bombing Israel. And yet they die anyway, and with a smile on the face of Netanyahu and the rest of his government. Now, keep in mind, Netanyahu was under investigation for corruption, and I believe even as we speak, he's still a corrupt individual. That's, you know, the case of right-wing white nationalists like Netanyahu and like the government of the state of Israel. These individuals are not Middle Eastern by any stretch of the imagination. They come from Ukraine, and they used to be the Khazarian nation. They're Europeans, they're white. And that is the Palestinian plight. But they are not innocent in all that we are seeing, because they too are responsible for where we're being. Remember that. The Palestinians, I love the way they're calling these individuals Palestinians. They are Arabs/Muslims. Stop. If you want to call Palestine, formerly Judea, Palestine, then hey, whatever you want to do, that's fine. That's up to you. But the truth of the matter, the historical truth of the matter, is that Palestine was the final home, in my opinion, the final gathering spot of Negroes who are Hebrews. And during that stay in Palestine, they moved Negroes out of the way and replaced them with another kind. Not Negroes and not of the same mind. So against our better judgment is going to be the discussion today, and hopefully some of you will stick around to hear what I have to say, because this is a damn good topic. All right, so I want to go over some of the contents, the chapters themselves. Chapter 1, after the acknowledgments and preface, how the United States' special relationship with Israel came about. That is an interesting topic. Chapter 2, the beginnings. Chapter 3, Louis Brandeis, Zionism and the Perusium. Interesting. Chapter 4, World War I and the Balfour Declaration. Now, if you have had a chance to tune into this station, you have seen before the Balfour Declaration, and it's a document that no one should ignore. Chapter 5, Paris Peace Conference, 1919, Zionists defeat calls for self-determination. Now, that's an interesting chapter, isn't it? Interesting, very interesting. What do we got next? Chapter 6, Forging and Ingathering of All Jews. Chapter 7, The Modern Israel Lobby is Born. Chapter 8, Zionist Colonization Efforts in Palestine. Chapter 9, Truman Accedes to Pro-Israel Lobby. Chapter 10, Pro-Israel Pressure on General Assembly Members of the United Nations. Chapter 11, Massacres and the Conquest of Palestine. Chapter 12, United States Front Groups for Zionists Militarism. Chapter 13, Infiltrating Displaced Persons Camps in Europe to Funnel People to Palestine. Well, I wonder what they got on their mind. Chapter 14, Palestinian refugees, chapter 15, Zionist influence in the media, oh goodness. Chapter 16, Dorothy Thompson, played by Katharine Hepburn and Lauren Bacall. And that seems works cited, further reading, and notes, and that's all. Now, this, this book is not a book that they wanted anyone to take a look into. They have a blacklist of books that they keep from the general public as well as much as they're able, but with the advent of Amazon, which, as we all know who are old enough to know, Amazon started off as a bookstore. It was Barnes and Noble's worst nightmare, all right? And so, you know, now that we have access to books not normally accessible, it seems that the information and the conflicts in the nations can now easily be addressable. So what chapters matter and what chapters don't? I think all of them are particularly interesting. I think I'm going to start from the beginning. Might as well. I don't need to read the preface as far as I can tell. Chapter 1, we're going to start there, and I don't know. I'll read until I can until I'm done. All right. Yes. So thanks so much for you guys showing up. All of you. This is not a numbers game for me. What I say is not popular by any stretch of any imagination, but it is imperative that all of this information be shared with the Negro Nation. And remember, I preface and predicate everything I do on the fact that they did not want us to read. That's an ideation that should be magnified to a factor of 1 trillion regarding the attention of Negroes, Black people in this country that they call us. They did not want us to be able to read. And if there's any more proof you have, well, that's all you need. Let's begin. Chapter 1. How the United States special relationship with Israel came about. When we talk about Israel, we're not talking about us because, well, we're the part of Israel that they put on the back of the bus. Yeah, well, whatever. I'm just doing what I do. Moving on. While many people are led to believe that United States support for Israel is driven by the American establishment and U.S. national interests, the facts don't support this theory. Okay? The reality is that for decades, U.S. foreign policy and defense experts opposed supporting the creation of Israel. Well, an opening salvo, to be sure. Alison Weir writes this book, Against Our Better Judgement. For those of you that might be joining in, please do me a favor, like, share, subscribe, and tell a friend. They then similarly opposed the massive American funding and diplomatic support that sustained the forcibly established state and that provided a blank check for its aggressive expansion. They were simply outmaneuvered and eventually replaced. Like many American policies, U.S. Middle East policies are driven by a special interest lobby. However, the Israel lobby, as it is called today in the United States, consists of vastly more than what most people envision in the word lobby. Now check this out, folks. As this book will demonstrate, the Israel lobby is considerably more powerful and pervasive than other lobbies. Components of it, both individuals and groups, have worked underground, secretly, and even illegally throughout its history, as documented by scholars and participants. And even though the movement for Israel has been operating in the United States for over 100 years, most Americans are completely unaware of this movement and attendant ideology, a measure of its unique influence over public knowledge. The success of this movement to achieve its goals, partly due to the hidden nature of much of its activity, has been staggering. It's also come to an almost unimaginable cost. It has led to massive tragedy in the Middle East, 100-year war of violence and loss, sacred land soaked in sorrow. Well, forgive me while I borrow some current circumstances. And all we got to do is take a look and just, hey, look, see what's happening over in the Middle East? This is a time-honored tradition between the two, to say the least. And they've been at this since before I was born. I got here in 1965, I mean, they have literally done everything to keep this conflict alive. It's true. So let's continue. And again, thank you for tuning in, showing up, being here. I just want to make sure that we all have this information in our ear. In addition, this movement has been profoundly damaging to the United States itself. As we will see in this two-part examination of the pro-Israel movement, it has targeted virtually every significant sector of American society, worked to involve American in tragic, unnecessary, and profoundly costly wars. You'd think this book was written yesterday. Dominated Congress for decades, increasingly determined which candidates could become serious contenders for U.S. presidency, and promoted bigotry toward an entire population, religion, and culture. It has promoted policies that have exposed Americans to growing danger and then exaggerated this danger while disguising its cause, fueling actions that dismember some of our nation's most fundamental freedoms and cherished principles, which are all a lie. I thought I'd just throw that in, just to stick it in their eye. All this for a population that is considerably smaller than New Jersey. My God, that's where I hail from. Is that not odd? So, against our better judgment, the opening salvo of the book, as we've just taken a look, involves how the Israeli lobby in the United States moved mountains, for goodness sakes, to get the state of Israel moving. And I'm certain that in the pages of this book, we're going to find a lot more to be proving. Here we go, chapter 2, the beginnings. The Israeli lobby in the United States is just the tip of an older and far larger iceberg known as political Zionism, an international movement that began in the late 1800s with the goal of creating a Jewish state somewhere in the world. Now let's pause there. Why would there be a goal of creating a Jewish state somewhere in the world? If you are Jewish, you should simply be from Israel. This should not be a question. And the move should have been done with absolute ease. I mean, there shouldn't have been anybody's attitude needed to be appeased. It should have been not even a rent and not even a lease. It should have been there, I mean, with absolute peace. But the lobby began in the 1800s, with 1897, the movement taking form, led by a European journalist named Theodore Herz. Coalesced the first Zionist Congress held in Basel, Switzerland, which established the World Zionist Organization, representing 117 groups the first year and 900 groups the next. It grew exponentially. While Zionists considered such places as, wait a minute, Argentina, what? Uganda, oh, they're just gonna move to Uganda? Okay, right. The Mediterranean island of Cyprus, wait, are y'all reading this? They considered Texas. Hold it, wait, hold up, wait. Let me get this straight, hold on. A group of individuals got together about 1800, and about 1897, they really got into the weeds of where they needed to be. And see, they began to pick places, and they didn't start with what would be familiar faces. They considered Argentina. Wait, folks, the state of Israel would have been in Argentina if somebody had their way. It could have been Uganda, the Mediterranean, or the island of Cyprus. And Texas was also a spot that might have been chosen to be, the state of Israel. I would have gone for that. I mean, I just stayed out of Texas, It's not a big deal. Everybody still with me, the Doug Rice Show? Thanks so much. They eventually settled on Palestine for the location of their proposed Jewish state. Even though Palestine was already inhabited by a population that was 93 to 96% non-Jewish. The best analysis says the population was 96% Muslim and Christians who owned 99% of the land. Oh, really? Well, I wonder, we do understand that the Palestinians are biblically accused of selling Negroes to Europeans. I'm just going there. That's what I'm seeing. I mean, the Jewish people got involved. I mean, they got to have their pound of flesh. I mean, they just want to make sure every Negro they found was fresh. Okay, I'll stop. After the Zionist Congress, Vienna's rabbis sent 2 of their number to explore Palestine as a possible Jewish state. I don't understand this. Was Jerusalem there at the time? That's odd. I don't understand. Well, you're telling me that they, in effect, knew they did not belong. They were not Jew, and their evidence wasn't strong. And they literally considered other places to put their non-Negro Jewish faces. Yeah, whatever. These rabbis recognized the obstacle that Palestinians presented to the plan, writing home. The bride is beautiful, but she is married to another man. What? What? And this is the place you decided to go, another land? Still, Zionists ultimately pushed forward. Numerous Zionist diary entries, letters, and other documents show that they decided to push out these non-Jews financially, if possible, violently, if necessary. Folks, please share and like and subscribe to this show, if you don't mind. And, tell your friends. Hit the like button. I think that helps my algorithms. Political Zionism in the United States. The importance of the United States to this movement was recognized from early on. One of the founders of political Zionism, Max Nordau, wrote a few years after the Basel Conference, Zionism's only hope is the Jews of America. At that time and for decades after, the large majority of Jewish Americans were not Zionists. In fact, many actively opposed Zionism. In the coming years, however, Zionists were to woo them assiduously with every means at hand. Oh, you just had to use that word assiduously, like I wasn't going to pronounce that. The extent to which Nordau's hope was eventually realized is indicated by the statement by a prominent author on Jewish history, Naomi Cohen. Cohen, who in 2003 wrote, "But for the financial support and political pressure of American Jews, Israel may not have been born in 1948. Wow. To this might be added Zionist success in influencing American politicians, the media, and much of the general public. Now, let's figure out how they did that. I'm pretty certain that they used media, newspapers, they used every form of communication to fill the minds of the American nation of a positive view toward going somewhere else and stealing people's land. I mean, what you gonna do? Hey, the Americans did the exact same thing, right? So get at it. Groups advocating the setting up of a Jewish state had first begun popping up around the United States in the 1880s. Emma Lazarus, the poet whose words would adorn the Statue of Liberty, promoted Zionism throughout this decade. A precursor to the Israeli flag was created in Boston in 1891. In 1887, President Grover Cleveland appointed a Jewish ambassador to Turkey, seat of the Ottoman Empire, which at that time controlled Palestine. Now, I did not know that. So the Ottoman Empire, which was the vast majority of the components making up the Middle East, controlled Palestine. And I need you to let this roll through your Negro mind. So what we got a bunch of Europeans up north, nowhere near Palestine, of course, that are determining that white Jews who looked elsewhere for a homeland, you know they're confused, would settle their asses amongst Muslim masses, and then they wonder how long the peace is gonna last. Yeah, I had to slip that in there. What do you want me to do? I'm doing a show. Okay, here we go. Every president, oh, wait, right there, boom, boom. Every president, both Republican and Democrat, followed this precedent for the next 30 years. Wow. During this era, the ambassadorship to Turkey came to be considered a quasi-Jewish domain, writes Dalin. By the early 1890s, organizations promoting Zionism existed in New York, Chicago, Baltimore, Milwaukee, Boston, Philadelphia, and Cleveland. Reports from the Zionist World Congress in Basel, which 4 Americans had attended, gave this movement a major stimulus, galvanizing Zionist activities in American cities that had large Jewish populations. In 1897, 1898, Zionists founded numerous additional societies throughout the East and the Midwest. In 1898, they converged in a first annual conference of American Zionists held in New York on July 4th. There, they formed the Federation of American Zionists, or FAZ. Nah, that ain't gonna last. By the 1910s, the number of Zionists in the United States approached 20,000 and included lawyers, professors, and businessmen. Even in its infancy, when it was still relatively weak and represented only a tiny fraction of the American Jewish population, Zionism was becoming a movement to which congressmen, particularly in the eastern cities, began to listen. The movement continued to expand. By 1914, several additional Zionist groups had formed, including Hadassah, the Women's Zionist Organization. By 1918, there were 200,000 Zionists in the United States, and by 1948, this had grown to almost 1 million. From early on, Zionists actively pushed their agenda in the media. One Zionist organizer proudly proclaimed in 1912, the zealous and incessant propaganda which is carried on by countless societies. The Yiddish press, from very early period, espoused the Zionist cause. By 1923, every New York Yiddish newspaper, except one, was Zionist. Yiddish dailies reached 535,000 families in 1927. While Zionists were making major inroads and influencing Congress and the media, State Department officials were less enamored with Zionists, who they felt were trying to use the American government for a project damaging to the United States. Unlike politicians, State Department officials were not dependent on votes and campaign donations. They were charged with recommending and implementing policies beneficial to all Americans, not just one tiny sliver working on behalf of a foreign entity. Well, that's interesting, isn't it, folks? In memo after memo, year after year, U.S. diplomatic and military experts pointed out that Zionism was counter to both U.S. interests and principles. While more examples will be discussed later, Secretary of State Philander Knox was perhaps the first in the pattern of State Department officials rejecting Zionist advances. In 1912, the Zionist Literary Society approached the Taft administration for an endorsement. Knox turned them down flat, noting that problems of Zionism involve certain matters primarily related to the interest of countries other than our own. Despite that setback, in 1912, Zionists garnered a far more significant victory in the same year, one that was to have enormous consequences both internationally and in the United States, and that was part of a pattern of influence that continues through today. Well, isn't that a mouthful? Listen, what we're dealing with today is an echo of what occurred back then. Only the echo seems louder than the origin, if you understand my point. It's going to get louder, folks. I mean, and the crowd is going to get crowder. I mean, it's going to get real loud. I mean, it's going to go down. Right now, all of the nations that were involved either for or against, this problem unresolved, they are on the very brink of doing exactly what you think. All we need to do is look in Scripture, and we'll see. This is not going to end well. Well, who can tell? Let's continue. Chapter 3. Louis Brandeis' Zionism and the Perushim. We are reviewing a book named Against Our Better Judgement by Alison Weir. It is a book which questioned the move of creating the state of Israel. And now that does prove to be a question they needed still. They had to question this move because they understand. They understood. What's happening now? It's just no good. Chapter 3. In 1912, prominent Jewish American attorney Louis Brandeis, or Brandeis, I know that's French, it's got to be. I'll just call him Louis Brandeis, who was to go on to become a Supreme Court justice, became a Zionist. Within 2 years, he became head of the International Zionist Central Office, newly moved to America from Germany. Now, did you hear that? The origins of these people who call themselves Jews are Europe in nature. I mean, that's just it. It's not, they have absolutely no association with anything involving a Hebrew nation. They are converts, Khazarian converts turned Ukrainians. The very idea of them being Hebrews is insane. Okay, I'll stop. I'm sorry. Well, while Brandeis is an unusually well-known Supreme Court justice, most Americans are unaware of the significant role he played in World War I and of his connection to Palestine. Some of this work was done with Felix Frankfurter, who became a Supreme Court justice 2 decades later. Interesting, isn't it? It all pays. Perhaps the aspects of Brandeis that is least known to the general public and often even to academics is the extent of his zealotry and the degree to which he used covert methods to achieve his aims. While today Brandeis is held in extremely high esteem by almost all Americans, there was significant opposition at the time to his appointment to the Supreme Court, largely centered on widespread accusations of unethical behavior that seems to be the conduct they savor. A typical example was the view that Brandeis was a man who has certain high ideals in his imagination, but who is utterly unscrupulous in method in reaching them. In other words, for him, the ends justify the means. While today such criticisms of Brandeis are either ignored or attributed to political differences or anti-Semitism, there is evidence suggesting that such views may have been more accurate than Brandeis partisans would like. In 1982, historian Bruce Allen Murphy, in a book that won a certificate of merit from the American Bar Association, reported that Brandeis, a Frankfurter, had secretly collaborated over many years on numerous covert political activities. Zionism was one of them. Do you see what we're dealing with over in the Middle East? A sinister lie, to say the least. In one of the most unique arrangements in the court's history, Brandeis enlisted Frankfurter, then a professor at Harvard Law School, as he paid political lobbyist and lieutenant. As his paid political lobbyist and lieutenant, writes Murphy in his book, The Brandeis-Frankfurter Connection, The Secret Political Activities of Two Supreme Court Justices. And might I pause for the cause? That is still going on. The mess up in the Supreme Court has never stopped. The insider trading, the abnormal relating, the needing and abating, all of this crap still goes on, even back in the past. That's just amazing. So this guy worked and found this out, that these two were scumbags as Supreme Court justices. In like manner, that's what sits in the Supreme Court today. And I don't know, I can't imagine who might come to mind, Clarence Thomas. Working together over a period of 25 years, they placed a network of disciples in positions of influence and labored diligently for the enactment of their desired programs. This adroit use of the politically skillful Frankfurter as an intermediary enabled Brandeis to keep his considerable political endeavors hidden from the public, continues Murphy. Brandeis only mentioned the arrangement to one other person, Murphy cites, another Zionist lieutenant, Court of Appeals Judge Julian Mack. They're everywhere, and they're still everywhere, and they don't care. We'll see how it ends, though. One reason Brandeis and Frankfurter kept their arrangement secret was that such behavior by a sitting Supreme Court justice is considered highly unethical. Isn't this pointedly poignant today? As an editorial in the New York Times pointed out following the publication of Murphy's book, the Brandeis-Frankfurter arrangement was wrong. It serves neither history nor ethics to judge it more kindly, as some seem disposed to do. The prolonged, meddlesome Brandeis-Frankfurter arrangement violates ethical standards. The Times reiterates a point also made by Murphy. The fact that Brandeis and Frankfurter kept their arrangement secret demonstrated that they knew it was unethical, or at least realized that the public would view it as such. They were dodging the public's appropriate measure of fitness. Later, when Frankfurter himself became the Supreme Court justice, he used similar methods, placing his own network of disciples in various agencies and working through this network for the realization of his own goals. And of course, these included both Zionist objectives and Frankfurter's stewardship of FDR's programs to bring the into battle against Hitler. Please like, subscribe, and share this effort, folks. We're bringing receipts. If you don't understand how this all relates to what's going on in the land across the sea, then you have no business on this show listening to me. And you can leave. If you don't understand how this ties in, then I just don't know what to tell you. Get up, get that damn grin off here. Anyway, seriously, knowing this, if knowing the past, knowing what occurred in the past, you know, it brings your vision of truth. It makes it vast, because you have a myopic view of what's happening over in the Middle East right now. You have a one-sided, lopsided lie as these creatures murder other creatures by and by. And their whole world is accepting the falsehood. And these people over there are up to no good. All right, I'll stop. Next, let's just keep going. Hey. Frankfurter had joined the Harvard faculty in, their activities, Murphy notes, were part of a vast, carefully planned and orchestrated political crusade undertaken first by Brandeis through Frankfurter, and then by Frankfurter on his own to accomplish extrajudicial political goals. Now, where you guys see these numbers, 37, 36, if you were or I were to click on those numbers, that would be taken to the reference, which also are further receipts if it's your preference. Frankfurter had joined the Harvard faculty in 1914 at the age of 31, a post gained after the Brandeis initiated donation from financier Jacob Schiff. I wonder if he's any relation to Adam Schiff. To Harvard, created a position for Frankfurter. Then, Murphy writes, for the next 25 years, Frankfurter shaped the minds of generations of the nation's most elite law students. After Brandeis became head of the American Zionist movement, he created an advisory council, an inner circle of his closest advisors, and appointed Felix Frankfurter as one of its members. The Parishum, or the Perushim, I'll do that. Even more surprising to this author, and even less well known both to the public and to academics, is Brandeis's membership in a secret society that covertly pushed Zionism, both in the United States and internationally. So that's hidden from the public and from academia, that he had a membership that covertly pushed Zionism, not only in the United States, but also internationally. And the results are what the Palestinians are suffering through today. Israeli professor Dr. Sarah Schmidt first reported this information in an article about the society published in 1978 in the American Jewish Historical Quarterly. She also devoted a chapter to the society in a 1995 book. Author and former New York Times editor Peter Gross, sympathetic to Zionism, also reported on it in both a book and several subsequent articles. According to Gross, a highly regarded author, Brandeis was a leader of an elitist secret society called the Parishim, the Hebrew word for Pharisees and separate, which grew out of Harvard's Menorah Society. Did you just read that? Now, hear that again, folks, because they've got their own secret societies, and they're no joke. They've got Skull and Bones and the Illuminati and, all this secret society. But at no point in time have I ever heard of the Perushim. And naturally, it's, a word that means Pharisees and Sadducees and vipers and everything that Yeshua called these synagogue of Satan snipers. And that does not say separate, it says separate. Okay? It is a command, it is a verb, it is a movement word. It's not something of a past nature. So this is a secret society that this former Supreme Court justice, an elitist secret society called the Perushim, the Hebrew word for Pharisees and separate, which grew out of Harvard's Menorah Society. Wow. Schmidt writes, the image that emerges of the Parishim is that of a secret underground guerrilla force determined to influence the course of events in a quiet, anonymous way. Gross writes that Brandeis used the Perushim as a private intellectual cadre, a pool of manpower for various assignments. Brandeis recruited ambitious young men, often from Harvard, to work on the Zionist cause and further their careers in the process. As the Harvard men spread out across the land in their professional pursuits, Gross reports their interests in Zionism were kept alive by secretive exchanges and the trappings of a fraternal order. Each invited initiate underwent a solemn ceremony, swearing the oath to guard and to obey and to keep secret the laws and the labor of the fellowship, to its existence and its aims. At the secret initiation ceremony, new members were told, listen carefully, folks, because this don't get old. You are about to take step which will bind you to a single cause for all your life, a lost cause, but whatever. You will, for 1 year, be subject to an absolute duty whose call you will be impelled to heed at any time, in any place, and at any cost. And ever after, until our purpose shall be accomplished, you will be a fellow of brotherhood whose bond you will gather is greater than any other in your life, dearer than that of family, of school, of nation. What? Wow, you had to pledge like that, dog. Yeah, I ain't about it. Yeah. See, that's not really required. By blood, we are Hebrew. Did you hear me? We don't have to take a pledge, all right? So forget all that nonsense and verbiage he just said. While Brandeis was a key leader of the Parushim, an academic named Horace M. Callan was its founder, creating it in 1913. Callan was an academic first hired by Woodrow Wilson, who was then president of Princeton, to teach there. Of course, Woodrow became president. When Callan founded the Parushim, he was a philosophy professor at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. Callan is generally considered the father of cultural pluralism. In her book on Callan, Schmidt includes more information on the society in a chapter entitled Callan's Secret Army, the Parushim. She reports, a member swearing allegiance to the Parushim felt something of the spirit of commitment to a secret military fellowship. Really. Callan invited no one to become a member until the candidate had given specific assurances regarding devotion and resolution to the Zionist cause. Schmidt writes, and each initiate had to undergo a rigorous analysis of his qualification, loyalty, and willingness to take orders from the order's executive council. Not surprisingly, it appears that Frankfurter was a member. What are we talking about? We must work silently through education and infection. More members of the Parushim were quite clear about the necessity of keeping their activities secret. An early recruiter to the Parushim explained, an organization which has the aims we have must be anonymous, must work silently, and through education and infection rather than through voice, force, and noise. He wrote that to work openly would be suicidal for their objective. Gross describes how the group worked toward achieving its goals. The members set about its meeting people of influence here and there casually on a friendly basis. They planted suggestions for action to further the Zionist cause long before official government planners had come up with anything. For example, Gross writes, as early as November 1915, a leader of the Parushim went around suggesting that the British might gain some benefit from a formal declaration in support of a Jewish national homeland in Palestine. More on this in the following chapter. Brandeis was a close friend of President Woodrow Wilson and used this access to advocate for the Zionist cause, at times serving as a conduit between British Zionists and the president. In 1916, President Wilson named Brandeis to the Supreme Court. At the time, as was required by standard ethics, Brandeis gave in to pressure to officially resign from all his private clubs and affiliations, including his leadership of Zionism. But behind the scenes, he continued his work quietly, receiving daily reports in his Supreme Court chambers and issuing orders to his loyal lieutenants. When the Zionist Organization of America was reorganized in 1918, Brandeis was listed as its honorary president. However, it was more than just honorary. As historian Donald Neff writes, through his lieutenants, he remained the power behind the throne. One of these lieutenants, of course, was Frankfurter. Zionist membership expanded dramatically during World War I, despite the efforts of some Jewish anti-Zionists, of whom called the movement foreign, un-American, racist, and separatist phenomenon. All right, and shall I go on to chapter 4? Because you know there's a whole lot more. Listen, I'm going to stop there because there's a whole lot more to see. Chapter 4 is something we don't need to go on because we went over that, if you remember. And so I will skip to chapter 5 because there's more to keep this subject alive. And the Paris Peace Conference, that is another one that I went over as well in the Zionist. Okay, so forging and ingathering of all Jews. That will be the next chapter I peruse. I may not stop, who knows? But we'll just see how this goes. While I am thinking about it, I got to tell you, folks, I need your support. I know that there are just a few in the room, but you know, I'll have this shared everywhere soon. As I turn my back on the world, I'm certain you understand the world will turn its back on me. You can see the kind of reporting that I report for everyone to see. But it's vital that we understand what's happening in our land. We're on the way, certainly. Our second Exodus is pressing next to us. It's good to know the truth. It truly is. And you study the history to reveal that mystery. It's good to understand what's happening as opposed to what was happening then. And I leave you with that. I do believe I'll go. There is no reason to continue the show. I'm going to hope that you look at tonight's 2 offerings. There'll be a repeat, I believe, of Monday's show. So I'm trying to get it together so you all know. I do thank you for your support. And as well as please remember to go to twidware.com. That is our official sponsor of the Doug Rice Show. My name is Doug Rice. I appreciate your time. Been here an hour. You've been listening to my rhyme, and it's time to go so that I can think of another show. All right, thanks. And I wanted you to know that. And now you know. Bye-bye, folks. Wait, hold on. Damn, before it's too late, I know not too many of you here. But I always got to say the thing I say before you get out of here, okay? It's Thursday. Tomorrow's Friday. You don't know if you'll be alive the next day. Who knows? The way this war is going, there's a lot of their asses they're showing. I mean, but if you're going to be out there, and I know you got to be out there, you're probably going to work. Understand, around every corner, danger to Negroes do lurk. So if you're going to be out there and in those public places, can you do me a favor, please? Get that goddamned grin off your faces. Now you may leave.